everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I really hope this video records because I've just recorded it already and it didn't work out well. So this is actually my second time recording, which is very frustrating, but never mind. Here we go. I hope this one works. Yeah, good morning today. I made some strawberry scones this morning with my support worker, but I did it all myself. She was just there kind of watching them, and afterwards we ate the strawberry scones with cream and jam, which was really very nice, and these scones came out amazingly well. They're cut in half perfectly. I really felt I made them proper professional style. You know, I feel very, very pleased with them. I actually think, you know, I do actually maybe have a skill in the baking department, which I can't say for myself for many areas, but so I do feel, it did make me feel quite competent, and I am actually good at something, which is very nice to feel actually. Here are the scones. These ones are going in the freezer later. I'm just letting them cool down completely before I put them away. But yeah, they came out really, really well. So I was very pleased with them, and in another video I'll try and give you the recipe for them, maybe next week if I can remember. But today, I want to review this book here, which is Spectrum Women, Walking to the Beat of Autism. This book edited by Barb Cook and Dr. Michelle Garnett. So I'll just quickly read the blurb on the back to you to give you an insight as to what this book's about. Barb Cook and 14 other Spectrum women describe life from a female autistic perspective and present empowering, helpful and supportive insights from their personal experience for fellow autistic women. Dr. Michelle Garnett's comments validate and expand the experiences described from a clinician's perspective and provide extensive recommendations. Each writer offers their personal guidance on significant issues that particularly affect women, as well as those that are more general to autism. Contributors cover issues including growing up, identity, diversity, parenting, independence, and self-care, amongst many others. With great contributions from exceptional women, this is a truly well-rounded collection of knowledge and sage advice for any woman with autism. Barb Cook is editor of Spectrum Women, a magazine by and for autistic women, and is an active and widely respected autistic advocate, speaker, and writer. And I'll put the link for Spectrum Women below so you can check that out if you like. It is actually a very good website with lots of interesting articles on there and things. Dr. Michelle Garnett is a clinical psychologist and founder and director of Minds and Hearts, a specialist clinic for Asperger's syndrome and autism, based in Brisbane, Australia. Okay, so that's a book. I'm now going to talk you through my reactions to this book, both pros and cons. Okay. Right. Now, so this book was released in the year 2018, so it's a new publication. So the parts of the book that resonated with me. So on page 27, an autistic woman relates how she has been told that, I quote, "You can't be autistic, people like you." Now, no one has ever said this to me before, but I don't tend to tell that many people that I'm autistic. The only people who I disclose my diagnosis to are people, when I think it's necessary, really, you know, in terms of like them understanding me, or if I need like certain adjustments, like things like that, like for example in previous voluntary situations. So on a sort of case-by-case basis, but I don't know that many people, so there aren't many opportunities really for people to come out with things like this. The only time someone has said something along a similar kind of vein, if you like, was once when I was at my old voluntary job, and a volunteer there, you know, a complete member of the public really, didn't have any actual real understanding of autism. You know, just when I told her I had Asperger's, she went, "Oh, you must be mild," which at the time actually did upset me, but I didn't really know, because obviously it isn't mild, but I didn't quite know how to explain it to her, whereas I think now I would actually come back at that and try and explain. But yeah, no one has ever said anything like, "You can't be autistic, people like you." The woman explains, I think very well actually, how this is meant to be a compliment, but the implicit underlying meaning conveyed by the statement is that autism is a tragedy, that it's an innately bad thing, that she is too successful or appears too social to be autistic. So it's like kind of implying really that, you know, if you're anything other than a stereotype, if you're appearing happy and smiley and you know, you're having a conversation with someone and maybe you've achieved some things in your life that you're too successful, you're too happy, you're too smiley, you're too bubbly to be autistic, because people kind of have this assumption, this stereotype that autism is this really bad, really obvious thing that, you know, it's just bad. It's a sort of negative. So this comment exposes a person's preconceptions and prejudices about what autism is. It reflects ignorance. But I do think that it doesn't actually really excuse someone coming out with a comment like that. It actually, I think, and I'm going to be quite blunt about this, but I do feel this quite strongly, it comes down to bad manners. Okay? Full stop. Bad manners. You do not, and I've been told this from a young age. My mum brought me up with good manners. You know, you don't have, you could be, good manners is, got nothing to do with neurotype. It's all about how you've been brought up and what you've learnt. And my mum brought me up not to comment on people's age. And it always shocks me, and obviously when I was a child, you know, I did comment on people's age, and I could be quite inappropriate because, particularly I think for autistic children, it can be particularly hard, obviously, to pick up some of these manners, but it doesn't mean we can't learn them. And if you have a parent who's consistently guiding you and telling you over time, you will eventually pick these things up. So, you know, given enough time, I now know that you're not supposed to tell people, and I know the reasons as well. My mum actually explained the reasons, and as an autistic, we often like to have the reasons for these things, and the reasons make sense to me. It's offensive. But it always baffles me how so many non-autistic people who are supposed to have this great empathy and understanding, and sometimes I'm like, yeah, what? Because so many of them actually clearly don't. Do not hesitate to make a comment on someone's age. It's happened to be time and time again. And I'm like, were they not brought up with good manners? They clearly didn't have the same parenting I had. So it's along a similar thing to that. If someone's told you that they've got a particular condition, you know, you don't belittle it. You don't tell them, oh, don't be silly. People like you. You don't say, oh, it must be so mild. Like if someone had told me they had a bad back, for example. I mean, obviously it's completely different to autism. But, you know, I'm just using it as an analogy. If someone told me I had a bad back, I'm not going to say, oh, it must be very mild. You don't seem to have any problems. I'm not going to say that. If I did say that, it would be basically emotionally dense. I mean, yeah, I don't think you need to be autistic. I mean, this is what I'm saying is that good manners are cross neurotype. It's all about how you've been brought up. And I just think some people lack manners. So I don't think it is just down to ignorance here, because you can be ignorant about autism, and you know, most people will be ignorant about autism. That's to be expected, but it does not excuse bad manners. So yes, if someone tells someone they've got a condition, you don't pass judgment on its severity, you don't try and belittle it, you listen. That's what empathy is about. It's actually about listening, not about passing judgment on something you might not understand. I just had to make that clear. The irony is that people like me aren't supposed to be empathetic. Yeah, I don't know, it's just like, it just comes down to bad manners at the end of the day. So, carrying on then. So, in this book then, reasons are then given as to why autism might be diagnosed later in girls and women than in men. On page 34, it is explained that girls are often considered to be odd and eccentric as opposed to autistic. So this resonated with me because I grew up in the 90s, and when I was at school I was called an enigma by primary school teachers. Primary school and nursery school knew that I had difficulties. This was very obvious because my difficulties were a lot more obvious when I was a child. You know, I had very obvious difficulties. They weren't at all subtle. I didn't mask. They were obvious. Nursery school was picking up on it. They were complaining all the time to my parents about why I wasn't sitting still and that I was disrupting the other kids. They were constantly coming out with things like that. And now they didn't understand me because I had such a wildly discrepant learning profile and I had these interaction difficulties, but they didn't quite understand because I was so highly verbal. And why was I so good verbally and yet so poor in these other areas? And they just couldn't make sense of it. But I don't think there was enough awareness of autism back then. So obviously I wasn't diagnosed till I was 21. They labelled it as other things. So I was described as being aged 10, emotionally and physically still like a little girl, lacking in confidence and anxious. And this seems to be quite common, common for girls with autism, in particular. Obviously this could happen to boys and men too, as I'm sure it does, but it seems to be more common if you're a girl and woman for this to happen, for your behaviour to be put down to other things because of the stereotypes and for autism to be missed. Friendship styles are then discussed. On page 48 of the book, it is explained that autistic girls may think they're being loyal, but their friend may find them overly clingy. Now this interested me because I was called clingy by a girl at secondary school who actually gave it as a reason for why I can no longer be her friend. So this resonated with me as well. It's interesting they often say autistic girls are seen to be clingy, and when I was actually called that very word, I was called that by a girl at secondary school, so that's quite interesting. And then on page 50, it is said that autistic women are seekers who often try out different personalities and identities. So I can relate to this because I'm always trying to work out who I am, and I do fantasise a lot, particularly as a child. I was always fantasising about reinventing myself or learning how to be a different person, and I did. I copied other girls. I could talk about this if you like more in another video, but I really was a copier, but obviously, so yeah, I definitely, that really does resonate with me, and it's interesting, obviously, this is often cited as kind of part of what autistic girls and women are often like, because I was very much like that growing up. It says here that we try on these different personas in the same way as a non-autistic girl might try on clothes at a department store, which traditionally spectrum women hate. I did feel that was a bit of a generalisation, because in that case, obviously I'm not traditional then, am I? Because, I must have missed a memo on that one. Because certainly as an adult, it wasn't so much the case as a kid or teen. I hated clothes shopping as a kid or teen. My mum did it all for me. But as an adult, I actually do quite like trying on clothes, but it's a love-hate relationship, because obviously I don't like shopping, so it's that stressful side of it. But at the same time, I do like shopping, if that makes sense. So it really is a love-hate relationship. Yeah, it is stressful, but at the same time, clothes are a little bit of a special interest for me, and I do like collecting them. Most of the clothes I own, I don't actually even wear, and I'm a bit perfectionist about them, but that'll be for another time to talk about that if you like. But yeah, I do like trying on clothes as well. So this statement is a bit of a generalisation. That I do not like, as we're also different. I disagree with the view on page 51 that autism is not a disability. I agree that autism should not be viewed as a disorder or aberration. Autism is not a disorder. I'm not disordered, I'm not ill, and I do not have an aberration. I completely agree with that. But it is nearly always a disability in at least some areas. If you've got enough traits to actually get diagnosed, clearly it must be affecting you in quite significantly in at least some ways, for you to actually go and want to get assessed in the first place, right? So it doesn't really make sense to say that autism's not a disability, because, it kind of clearly is. Let me know, obviously, what you think, because I know this is quite a controversial issue, and for some people it's just semantics. They actually just don't like the word disability, which I can kind of understand because of its connotations. And actually, when I was a teenager, I hated the word disability, so I could kind of see where they're coming from. But I do think it's probably is really just about semantics. In fact, many people don't like the word disability. But whatever we call it, autism is, you are at a disadvantage if you are autistic. So, the woman then says, though, that she is clearly not talking about classic autism. However, although my autism historically fitted into the Asperger's category, I am still disabled. Disability doesn't just belong to classic autism. I would say that no matter what autism you have, you are going to be disabled in some way. I do feel that this woman, though, was a little bit biased, because maybe she doesn't experience autism as a disability precisely because for her she's coming from a very, very privileged position. Some of this is to do with, maybe a lot of it, I don't know, there are different types of autism obviously, and different situations that you might find yourselves in. But she's got a successful career. Nearly all the women in this book are actually very successful, even by non-autistic standards. So we're talking here full-time careers, we're talking about families, we're talking about long-term relationships, kind of all the trappings, if you like, of conventional life, maybe. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to deny the fact that many women in this book had really very extreme difficulties and, really, really very bad, horrendous things happened to them. So one of them, I think it was Barb Cook, she had She experienced extreme addiction, absolutely awful experiences and abuse, which luckily I've avoided. I think obviously it depends what type of autism you've got. Barb Cook looks like someone who's got quite a kind of out there type of autism, so she's obviously putting herself in these situations like going to pubs, which to me, pubs would be absolutely awful from a sensory perspective, but obviously for her, obviously it isn't such a problem, or she wouldn't have gone to pubs because everyone's different. So she maybe has a type of autism meant that she put herself out there a bit more and therefore got herself into these situations, whereas because my autism is a bit more like insular, I don't tend to seek out those sort of situations, so obviously that means that I'm less likely to be exposed to some of these things. But there is a sense, nevertheless, despite the fact that some of the women in this book went through these experiences, there is a sense that their lives were redeemed in the end, in a fairy tale resolution. That was the general impression of the book. So while that's really good, almost like a rags to riches tale, it went through it does read a bit like a fairy tale, some of these stories, and sometimes it does seem a little bit too good to be true. I mean, I'm sure some women do experience this, and that's great for them, but it just seems like, I don't think this is the reality for most. I mean, it's great, don't get me wrong, it's great to hear positive, successful stories, but I think the book would have been more inclusive if more long-term unemployed, single autistic women were included, such as those long-term benefits or support. If maybe you had women in their 50s, 60s, or younger, who, had never really been in work, who might have had similar difficulties, but actually whose lives weren't necessarily redeemed like that. It doesn't make them any less worthy. They might still have had, successes. It depends what you mean by success. But some of these successes just seem, too unattainable for many autistic people, who, just because of the nature of their disabilities, might actually never be able to get a career or work, and might actually pretty much always be on benefits, or need support and stuff, because of the nature of their disability. But it doesn't make them any less valuable, and just because they're not, working in a conventional sense, they might still be doing really interesting stuff, or we could look at their interests or things like that, and they might still be having quite fulfilled, happy autistic lives. So I just felt the book was a little bit elitist, and it didn't contain any I struggled to relate to the very successful autistic women. I guess it would be a bit, and that's not to do with autism. I mean, no matter what neurotype you are, it'd be a bit like, say, a non-autistic person reading a book with really very successful non-autistic celebrities and thinking, well, that looks great, but that isn't really they're not really good role models to have, really, if you're very unlikely to ever get to be a celebrity, and let's face it, most people can't. So this is, from an autistic perspective, this is almost celebrity status these women had. For most autistics, they're never going to be able to get a proper job, let alone a career, okay? And that's just reality. I'm just stating a reality here. I'm a very matter-of-fact, realistic person. That is the reality, whether we like it or not. However, I could relate to some of the intense interests described by the women, such as interest in politics and feminism. One woman in there, I think Katrina Stewart, was very interested, said she's very interested in politics and feminism, and that resonated with me. I actually went through a phase in my 20s when I was very interested in left-wing politics. To the point of attending a conference in my early 20s with support, but I still wouldn't have gone to this conference were it not for that interest. So there's a little bit in here about how interest can be very motivating, and I could certainly relate to Katrina's interest quite well. I think we must be quite similar in terms of what interests us. So, Katrina, if you're watching this video, I would like to say that I particularly enjoyed your piece in this book. I thought it was very good. Anyhow, I'm going to be moving on now to video number 2 on this review. Because, I don't want this video to run out on me. So, moving on to video number 2 now.